Good day, everyone. I'm Dale Thompson, and on the other side of the screen, you probably recognize Father Mark White. Father, thanks for coming with us. We appreciate that.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I wanted to bring Father Mark back, and the people who have been following his path understand that he has been suspended for over a year from 2 parishes in Southwest Virginia. And he's also being threatened right now of expulsion from the priesthood. And he started to do a speaker series, which I'm sponsoring, helping him, working with some equipment and getting the content recorded about sexual abuse survivors. And we just did the first one, and we'll do another one here in a couple weeks. But in between, I wanted to do a couple things. The first one that we're going to do today is I'm going to try to better understand why Father Mark is taking the position that he is, specifically with his refusal to give up his personal blog. And then hopefully later on this week, we will be taking questions and trying to get some other feedback, both of people who have listened to this this piece of content, this interview that I'm doing with Father Mark, and then also anything else that people would want to know before we do our next sexual abuse survivor, which is going to happen on the 25th and 26th of this month, which we'll be getting more information about. But I wanna really press Father today. So, Father, why is it that you won't give up the personal blog? It seems like and hopefully, you know, this has not gone so far that this strategy wouldn't work. But if you went to Bishop Knestout today, and you sat down with him, you walked into his office and said, "Okay, Bishop, I understand that you didn't like my personal blog. You didn't like certain things that I said on it, and I'm willing to just leave the blog. I'll go and put me in a parish or put me in the prison where you wanted to start the prison ministry for the Diocese of Richmond. But first, would that work at this stage of the game? And secondly, would you do it?"
I appreciate the question very much, especially since I think it is a question that a lot of people have in their minds, given how far this has gone at this point, that I would risk losing the priesthood over having a blog. I think there are plenty of good Catholics who don't understand that and don't think of a blog as being a particularly important thing for anybody to have, certainly not for a priest to have, and that there are a lot of other goods at stake here that, in the grand scheme of things, are more important. And the parish ministry of priests, I mean, I can't imagine anything more important.
Right.
So I appreciate the question very much and the chance to try to answer it. To answer the first part of your question, I don't know if I gave in completely on the demand that I remove myself from the internet altogether. I don't know if at this stage that would even work. The bishop has already submitted a petition to the Vatican. But who knows, it may reach a point where that question is on the table again for discussion, and there would be a way for me to avoid these bad consequences that have happened, that we could go back in the other direction if I agreed to eliminate my blog and my presence on the internet completely. So I appreciate the question. Why haven't I done it? Why won't I do it? In truth, I did do it for 4 months when the bishop initially demanded it. To be honest, not because I thought he had a right to demand that of me, but because I hoped for in a cooler moment, an opportunity to have a more open discussion about it so that we could have a compromise. And I, of course, am still perfectly willing to try to seek a compromise that would, from my point of view, just to be perfectly clear about that, the compromise would involve an engagement of the questions, the issues, the disputed points that I've written about, that I am ready to hear anyone, the bishop or anyone else, tell me that I'm wrong when I wrote this, that, or the other thing, that it's just simply wrong, or that it was not for, I didn't write it the right way. What I said, this is not convey the meaning that I wanted it to, or that the meaning I wanted to is just not the right meaning for me to have. I'm ready to hear all of that. And I hope that I do. I hope with the Vatican involved in this case at this point, maybe that actually will happen. Maybe we'll be able to have a discussion about the substance. Because I think that's where peace and reconciliation, the path to that peace and reconciliation would be down that line of discussion, if I'm making sense.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, let me just add to your position a little bit. I'm surprised that all priests don't have a blog. Okay, now I understand there's some technological limitations for, people who have born, when I was born with computers. I was on the internet before the internet was called the internet. Okay, but not everybody is like me. So I understand some of the technical limitations. But one of the things that I was so impressed with you and a lot of the other Catholic priests that I've been following is that you have 8 minutes or 15 minutes, 20 minutes once a week to talk to the parishioner. Maybe they come into your office to say hello or ask a question or something. Maybe to see him in the confessional, which is becoming less and less. I see less and less of that. So I'm not surprised that you have a blog, because I think it's a very important outreach to the parishioners. Okay? So I would think that the Catholic Church would say every priest should have a blog because it's an engagement vehicle. I guess the question is what you say on that blog, and then can the bishops manage that? As obviously Bishop Knesout doesn't want to manage it; he just wants it gone because of some of the things that you said. So are you saying today that you would not give up your blog? And if the answer is no, I'm not going to give up your blog, because that's basically what you wrote in a letter to Bishop Knestout when he was asking for you to request to be removed from the priesthood, which I thought was kind of interesting. I don't know why any faithful priest would ask to be removed. I don't get that at all. But you basically said you're not going to give up the blog. You're willing to get somebody moderated or an editor or figure out what he doesn't like that you said. And I've got plenty of things from his letter that he posted in the Martinsville Bulletin of things that he doesn't like what you said. You said things about him, and you said things about Pope Francis. But tell me why the blog is so important to you, and you're willing to potentially lose your priesthood because of your ability to write on this personal blog.
Right. I appreciate it. Right. Thank you for that question. And thank you for the encouragement of the other priests, also priests who try to use the means of communication that we have to connect with people, and it can be very effective. I stumbled into it, experimented with it going back 13 years, and found as time went on that it could be an extremely effective way of communicating with people. Especially like you say, that the time you have in a homily to try to propose things for the people to consider is pretty limited, and it's not a targeted audience, so to speak. It's people of all ages, different things on their minds. So I definitely have been grateful to be able to use my blog at times to write things out that are more involved, more complex, so that I feel like I'm offering the people the kind of teaching that I owe them in a way that they can take it on board as would suit them. So I appreciate your encouragement about that. I mean, as far as that, I would be willing to go to this extreme length just to preserve my personal blog. I mean, the fact of the matter is that WordPress.com could go kaput today. Could be and I wouldn't have a blog anymore, and I would have to live with that. And I'd be disappointed. I guess maybe I'd try to start it up somewhere else. I don't know, but the whole thing is itself not it's not something so solid. It's not as solid as the supernatural mystery of the priesthood. It's not as solid as my relationships with other human beings in person, and my relationship with my bishop is a much more significant and solid and important thing in and of itself than a blog is.
Right.
So I mean, to try to make that make a little more sense. I mean, the fact of the matter is that I'm given to writing. Even my homilies, I always write them out. My work as a priest is reading and writing first, and then everything else follows from that. I mean, praying, of course, fundamental, but praying and reading and writing for me kind of go all together. They're inseparable from each other.
Right.
So the problem that came clear to me in dealing with this issue with the bishop in the fall of 2019 and in the winter and the spring of 2020, what became pretty clear to me, and I think to a lot of people also, is it isn't the blog itself as a means of communication. It's what I have to say that is the issue.
Right.
And so if blogs didn't exist, I'd be saying it in some other way, and we'd have the same problem, I think.
Well, let me push back a little bit on that. Anything that you say that isn't written down or isn't videotaped goes into the ether, and then people can say whatever they want to say. I heard him say this. You heard him say this. Your blog is very specific, and it's been there for a long time, so people can go back to it and they can look and they can say, okay, we don't know what was happening with Father Mark at that particular moment, but we can read the words on the page and understand that he was really upset about it. Okay, and to be perfectly honest with you, you should have been upset about the things that you were upset with. Okay, with Eric being the person that ordained. That had to have been a kick in the gut, and you have to process it some way. And I also understand that the writing leads to thought, but the problem with that is the writing leads to thought that's published in a way where other people can read. Okay, so they can take it in, and they can, and I'll tell you, I've read this letter probably 10 or 15 times, and I've also read every blog post. Okay, and he's done what every journalist does when somebody makes a speech. They take out the worst part of a sentence. He takes out a worst part of the sentence. I despise everybody in the Pope's Roman meeting. I despise them all. Okay, no one's going to go back and read your total blog post to understand where that fits in, and whether it was a rhetorical flourish or actually that you mean it. These days, dangerous, dishonest mafiosa run the one true church of Jesus Christ. Okay, so I can understand why I understand because you're a philosopher, you're a thinker, you're a writer. That's how you process your thoughts. But as soon as you start putting them in print, your boss probably has something to say about it. And this is the thing that I struggle with. I told you that I was with Allstate for 26 years. I was in human resources the entire time. They took me out of a supervisor trainee role and they stuck me in human resources. I was there in education and training for 26 years. And obviously you can tell this is hard for me to say. But if it were up to me, you would have been gone a long time ago. Okay, and the reason is that human resource people and maybe the bishop have a responsibility to protect me and my situation, the corporation, the mission of the corporation, and also the reputation of leadership. We also had an obligation to honor, respect, and protect the employees that we have. Okay, so if I can equate that to a church, you have the responsibility as a priest to protect the church, its mission, and the parishioners under your care. Okay, and the bishop obviously believes you didn't do that. Because the bishop said he believes that you disobeyed his authority, rejected his efforts of correction, and fostered disunity in the church. Okay, do you believe that's correct? Did you do that?
I don't see it. I don't see it that way. To be sure, I don't see it that way. If I might just respond to maybe one after the other to a number of the things you just said.
Sure,
The
sure.
first, there being a written record to which to refer that it exists. I mean, I'm aware of the fact that I have created an ample written record that can be referred to for good or ill.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I would say that, a priest is a public official. A priest has a duty to the people to be accountable for what he says. So, in my opinion, that's part of what I owe the people who pay attention to me, that I'm not going to run away or try to hide what I've said. And so that there is a written record of it, even if it's used to condemn me, that's what seems to me to be what a public official of integrity does.
Right.
I mean,
Totally. Totally agree. And so you haven't taken off when he points out certain blog posts, you haven't taken them off, have you?
No, by no means. Right, because that brings me to point number two. I mean, I think that what he's written there in the letter, he has ostensibly done what I said that I've been looking for all along, which is have a dialogue about specifics, specific blog posts and what I wrote there. Now, that letter was not addressed.
That was really the first time that you knew what he was upset about, correct?
Exactly.
Because you had a couple meetings, and you said he had a notebook, but he wouldn't open it up. He wasn't dealing with specifics. So the first time you understood what he was upset about was the letter that he posted, basically to the parishioners. This letter didn't even go to you; it went to the parishioners.
Exactly. It was the first time he created a written record specifying what he objected to in my blog. So, I mean, to that extent, I said it at the time, I wrote a letter to my parishioners that I sent to my parishioners with that letter from the bishop, in which I said I was very grateful to the bishop for having done that, something that I had hoped to do with him and had asked to do with him twice in two face-to-face meetings. I had asked for that exact material that he would say, well, these are the posts that I disagree with or think that are wrong or have these bad effects.
Right.
So I was grateful to that extent. Now, the letter that he produced there that you just referred to, I mean, I don't think I'm being unfair to say it's just not completely honest. I mean, there's one straightforward error of fact where he said I refused to meet with him after he invited me numerous times. I had, in fact, met with him twice as of the writing of that letter and had asked him for that material twice in person, and he hadn't given it to me. So that's just not accurate. Maybe he forgot. I don't know why that accuracy is there.
No, I will stipulate that this is not an honest letter. Okay, this letter is intended to indict you, and it's written in a way so that the parishioners understand Bishop Knestout's point of view, not the truth, but Bishop Knestout's point of view. Okay, so I'll stipulate that. And like I said, I've read the blogs for the individual quotes here. You know, when I despise everybody in the Pope's Roman meeting, I've read that blog post. And anybody else who reads that blog post will understand that, you know, you are not somebody who's just saying things without putting an awful lot of thought into them, with an understanding of the historical and tragic history of the sexual abuse scandals in the Catholic Church. Okay, so I stipulate all of that. But when you start talking about your boss and about the Pope in the words that you used, whether they're true or not, do you disagree with his statement that he believes that you disobeyed his authority and that you made him that let me pull that specific You have worked against the unity of the church, promoted disrespect for the Holy Father, the church hierarchy, his bishop, and has demonstrated a will adverse to obedience to the bishop of his diocese when he took an oath to uphold at his ordination. Do you believe that sentence?
No, I mean, I understand why he wrote it, but I think it is fundamentally unfair what he's saying. I mean, let me say a couple things. I mean, you mentioned earlier that if you were the CEO or the human resources supervisor of this company, if you had this material in front of you, that you would have fired me a long time ago, because it does not reflect well on the company, and it's harmful to the company's reputation.
Right.
I understand what you're saying there. I mean, I'd like to say though, I would actually like to give you a little bit more credit. I mean, I think that you were the kind of manager who did believe in working with people to bring out the best in them so that people could realize their talents as part of a corporation. Which is the Catholic way of looking at what a corporation is. That it's a community of people who are coming into their own and giving glory to God by letting their talents come to fruition. Right, and that's what people working together. That's what it's all about, and that what the lines of authority in a company need to respect that, and that's going to produce the best outcome. Ultimately, is when people feel free to be themselves, to communicate, to open themselves up to their coworkers. Right? I mean, that's the kind of place people want to work. And that's the kind of place where people do the best work. I mean, I think we probably agree on everything I just said.
Yes, totally agree. We had a transition. I was hired in 1985, and we had a transition about 1990, and our attitude changed about. The best way I can explain it is that it was called upward communication, which basically a manager would have a meeting with his staff, hoping that they would bring their whole self to that meeting and open up about better ways of doing things. Okay, so, and we had this statement that we don't want you to leave half of yourself in the parking lot. We want you to bring your whole self, and we want you to bring your creativity, because we may not be doing it the right way, and we want your input. Okay, so we opened up the door for people to bring all of themselves to work, with a hard limitation on both sides of that, which is, here is Allstate's mission, and if you don't want to play with Allstate's mission and our rules, you can go find another place to work. Okay, so if somebody came and said, well, I don't like the way you do this, and we said, well, we're going to do it that way anyway, and they don't shut up, and they start berating their managers or talking badly in the community about what we're doing, as long as what we were doing was not illegal or immoral, we were going to continue to do it. And you need to be quiet and do it our way, because we've decided that's the way we're going to do it. Okay, so I totally agree with you that we want to bring everybody, and that's why one of the things that you said to me when you talked about you're not a trained monkey, that hit home to me, because I'm trying to get everybody to their highest God-given potential, because I believe that we're not displaying half of what God gave us at birth because of the failure of other human beings and the way we were raised and everything else. So it's always trying to get people to their highest potential, but to a limit. And Bishop Knesout believes that you went over that limit, that you should have just said, no, this is the way we're going to do it in the church. You're saying things that, frankly, are against the mission of the church. And I believe that you're disobeying my authority that you accepted when you prostrated yourself in front of me and I laid hands on you at ordination. I agree with what you said. It's just a question of where's the line, and he believes you crossed it.
Right. Yeah. And you brought it out, I think, very well, that to go right alongside what I said about individuals having the freedom to express themselves and to let, like you say, don't leave part of yourself in the parking lot. Show up with your whole self, to your task. Along with that, there is a certain degree of cohesion that has to occur. There has to be some discipline. Otherwise, there's not productive work is not going to occur. There's going to be a wheel spinning and a lot of chiefs and no Indians, and that doesn't you don't accomplish a lot that way. But I mean, I guess what I'd like to throw in there from my point of view, I'm not saying well, let's make a distinction. There's the distinction between petty carping, complaining that is pointless,
Right.
and genuine constructive criticism that is aimed towards a vision of things being better than they are now.
Sure.
And those are two different things, and it's hard for people to tolerate. I mean, there's always going to be the petty carping and complaining. That's always going to be there. But like you say, there's got to be a limit as to in what forum can you express yourself in that way. And if on a coffee break, feel free, but not in front of the shareholders.
Right.
I mean, and you make kind of distinction. And people need to respect that. I mean,
or out in the community when I'm trying to hire employees, don't talk bad about your employer, because I need to go into that community and hire more people to work for. So yeah, we understand. Yeah, we understand the difference between them. So we're good with that.
Right, and the forum that where I was articulating what I had to say doesn't really fit here perfectly either way. I mean, I do think there'd be more. I mean, I would be more. I'll just say from my point of view. I mean, I didn't want to burden the people in the church with these issues that I was addressing day in and day out in the pastoral life of the church. I mean, I didn't think that was right.
Sure.
I didn't think that would be fruitful. So I really didn't do that. I mean, I gave a couple homilies about it, and then that was it. But I had more to say and a lot more thoughts about it, a lot more to work out for myself. So I wrote about it in another forum that was open and public, but that was very optional and free to visit or not. I didn't shove it down anybody's throat. I think that is a kind of important difference here.
But you did put your homilies. You mixed in some of your homilies on your personal blog,
right.
and I would say probably, I don't know, 80% of the blog posts, maybe prior to 2018, were actually about scriptural issues, church and scriptural issues. I mean, there were, you're probably talking more after 2018 when the whole McCarrick thing blew up. But you were still putting all of your thoughts on the blog. Okay, so
so that people who were used to reading my homilies on there could keep doing it. And I know from readers that I talked to, I mean, some of them would go to my blog only to read what I had to say about McCarrick and the sex abuse scandal, and they would ignore the homilies. And other readers would go only to read the homilies because they didn't want to bother with the other stuff. Right. And I think that's the way these things work. I mean, but let me get back to one other thing I wanted to say. I mean, about it, and then we can get into the distinction between a company and the church, which I think there's a distinction that's pretty important. But even before we get there, I mean, let's just say it was Allstate, right? I mean, Allstate is something, even though it's a company that is only going to be on Earth as long as it's going to be on Earth. It still is something bigger than any of the individual human beings that are involved in it. It's bigger than that. It's bigger than the CEO. It's bigger than the board of directors. It has ideas. It has a service and a mission that is formulated that guides what it's all about and make people understand what the brand means. And that is a valuable thing, that brand, the name Allstate, and that's been built up by people working hard and doing the right thing for a long time, right? I mean, that's how the brand becomes valuable. So, I mean, just imagine the employee who becomes aware of the fact that even at the highest echelons of authority in the company, that the decisions have been made and continue to be made that seriously damage the value of that brand, that bring bad repute to the brand.
Right.
And so it's actually more a measure of someone believing in the company and loving the company that he or she would be willing to criticize and risk being fired. As opposed to just saying, well, what am I supposed to do with it? I'll be fired if I say anything about this.
Right. Okay, let's extend that. Let's extend that example. Okay, because I was that type of employee. Okay, I put more of my life energy into the company that I probably should have. One of my biggest regrets is the fact that I didn't spend more time with my family and less time with Allstate. So I was that employee that felt it was a family up until probably 5 years before I was really forced to retire because reduction in force. If I found out something that I thought was hurting the corporation that I loved, that I saw as an extended part of my family, I wouldn't have gone and started a blog for other people to know that information. I would have handled it in a different way. So let's extend your example. Okay, you have something about the church that is potentially devastating to the. I know the church is never going away. Okay, so man cannot kill the Catholic Church. So I understand that. But what would you have done differently? Okay, would you have continued to do the personal blog if you thought that there was a better way to do it? Because as an Allstate employee, the first thing I was not going to go on Facebook and start to badmouth the corporation because they were doing something at the highest levels that was hurting my beloved company. I would have handled it. I would have handled it more privately. Why didn't you?
I appreciate the question.
Oh, you
I
don't
think
appreciate the question. You always say you appreciate the question. That's because you like me. But that's a tough question. Would you have done things
right.
differently? If you knew you were in this spot right now, would you go back and say, geez, I don't know whether I would have done it so publicly. Maybe I would have done a private blog, an only person to see it. I mean, what would you have done it differently, or did you take the path that you thought was best for your purpose?
I mean, I can't say that I saw the whole trajectory of the way things would go at all. I didn't even. I mean,
That's fair.
as of late June, early July 2018, I still wanted to believe that the charges against McCarrick were false. I mean, I still wanted to believe that, and was inclined to believe that based on what I knew of him. Um, so I was.
But you knew at that stage there were other bishops and priests that were having problems, didn't you? You knew that this was bigger than just McCarrick
Well, yes, yes
because
and
of
no.
2002, because of Spotlight
Right.
and the
Yeah.
PA, the Attorney General report and all that. So you knew that this was a problem. You were just hopeful that the person that ordained you wasn't a sexual predator.
No, I have to say it's deeper than what you just said. I mean,
Okay.
it's not as if I wasn't aware back in 2002 of the Boston Globe investigation and what it found, but my way of reacting to it was to defend the idea that the church has as much integrity as any other human institution, if not more so, in this area, and that hostility to the church is fundamentally guiding the way that it's being covered in the media.
Okay.
That the problem is widespread, exists in all institutions, and that this is unfair to make this out to be a problem of the Catholic Church more so than of public school systems or the Boy Scouts
Right.
or families for that matter. I mean, most sexual abuse takes place in families. I mean, it's
Right.
a terrible thing to
So
contemplate, but
you were
it's true.
hopeful. You were hopeful that the church had more integrity than the other human institutions.
Right. Yeah, and I convinced myself that that was in fact the case,
Okay.
and so and with a good amount of evidence to support that, because the fact of the matter is there are a lot of things that the church has done that other institutions haven't done. I mean, we've had a systematic report of the data that was available as to the prevalence of the problem in our institution. It's been studied nationwide. That that's never been done of high school teachers. There's no data available like that the Catholic Church has made available on our expense to the world. I mean, that's the kind of systematic, the background checks that we have, the educational apparatus that we have set up as far as ensuring that anybody involved in church ministries is thoroughly educated about this problem as an ongoing problem that we need to be aware of. I mean, we have that's all in place. I mean, so there's certain ways in which the Catholic Church can and does pat ourselves on the back all the time as far as being an exemplary institution in this with this issue. But I mean, what I realized because of McCarrick and then the aftermath, the way that what turned out to be true eventually came to light as far as who knew what and when about McCarrick and what they knew about him.
Right.
I realized that all those genuinely good accomplishments of the church were fundamentally a public relations maneuver made by a very powerful, financially powerful institution controlled by this very small group of people to really protect themselves and to cover up much deeper, profoundly systemic problems that have not been remotely addressed. And so that I became aware of that. That's what I became aware of. Not secrets per se, but a way of seeing the whole thing that for me changed from seeing the church in the best possible light to seeing the reality that the good light things were themselves part of a cover-up. What I realized was,
let's go back. Let's go back to that. You spoke about the education and the background checks and the rules. Because I think I told you I spent a lot of time sitting in the priest's car, being driven from softball games and basketball games and things like that. You can't do that now. Is all of that stuff beneficial to the effort to protect children and young adults? Or is that just a smokescreen? Okay, it had to have some good aspects to it.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, criminal background checks and systematic education. I mean, who can argue with that? I mean, that is certainly something good. Problem is that anybody who's ever, getting back to this whole matter of maintaining discipline in an organization, right? I mean, anyone who's ever really had to do that knows that talk is cheap, right? The say beautiful words about what you intend do not bring about cohesion and the right spirit in a group. That people who break the rules in a way that is harmful, they need to be punished. And if that doesn't happen, you can talk about how great you want things to be till you're blue in the face, and it doesn't mean anything. You don't really mean it if you're not willing to confront even the most powerful person in the organization when that person is guilty of gravely harming another person. That there is not a double standard, even for someone very powerful. If there is a double standard, then all your words are just words. And that's the problem that we've had and have. And so the bishops love to say, well, we solved this problem back in 2002. But how can you say we solved it when the McCarrick cover-up really began right around that time? It didn't end at that time. Right at the time when everyone was promising there'd be no more cover-ups, that's when it began. So that hasn't solved anything if that is the case. There have to be no more cover-ups. People that need to be held accountable when they need to be held accountable for the problem to be solved.
Okay. All right. Let's get back to the. I loved Allstate up until the point when the corporation became more valuable as an entity than the employees that built it. Okay. I think there was a period of time, and the people that worked with me will understand about the time frame where the employees became objects of production rather than people that were helping to build the values of the company. Okay, you have a similar situation with the church, that there's a period of time where you felt that it was it was strong, and you appreciate it and everything else. And then you got to the point where it started to become less than that, and you wanted to protect it. I assume you love the church. Is that correct?
Of course, I love the church. Yeah.
Okay.
God help me.
Okay.
Right.
So could you have done this differently? Because I wouldn't, like I said, go back to the situation. I wouldn't have started a public blog if I thought that the CEO was doing something that was going to ultimately hurt the company that I love. Okay, I would have tried to do it in a less public way. Okay, did you do that? Did you think about that? Was that an unrealistic expectation that you could actually save your beloved church by doing something less public than you did?
I appreciate the question.
And I understand why you did the blog. Okay, I get that, but you could have done the blog without putting it public. You could have processed all your feelings without anybody commenting or anybody understanding it or reading, documenting it for everybody to see forever.
Right. Let me say two things. First, I can say that I've been a priest long enough and been involved in the governance of the church as a priest long enough that I do have experience of trying to get problems solved the way that you're talking about. The interior forum, minimizing the public aspect to it, and have experienced a great deal of frustration and difficulty with that, and paid the price in other matters when it comes to that type of thing before. I mean, we can get into that if you want to, but
Okay.
so and while I, in those previous episodes, one thing I realized is that the private quote unquote deal making or careerism, whatever you want to call it, I mean, the private network of decision makers, let's just say in the Diocese of Richmond, the fact that in my previous dealings there was a great hostility to ever put anything in writing. It always the way to do it is a phone call. We don't want to have it. We don't want any of this written down.
Yep.
It's I realized that was a big part of the problem itself. That we were part of. I mean, I am part of. Priest is part of. Like I said earlier, as a public official in an organization that affects the well-being. I mean, and we're talking about the spiritual and eternal life, but let's just leave it at well-being for the moment, of a lot of people. And it is just not right that we are not more accountable than we are, as far as the way decisions are made, why they're made the way they are, what are the rationales. That there just is no written evidence of that. No, you can't, no one who wants to understand much. I mean, because you can't criticize something you don't understand. But even if you want to have, like, let's just say you're a layperson who wants to understand why priests are assigned the way that they are. Why is this priest assigned here and that one there? And what's the rationale? That's a completely legitimate question for a Catholic to ask. A Catholic deserves an answer that makes some sense. You might not agree with it,
Right.
but there should be an answer. And that type of information is just completely unavailable. It's not even remotely available to the public.
It's
and
not
that
in the world either. I mean, we in human resources, if you write something down on a piece of paper, it had better be absolutely mandatory or mandated by the state or federal government. And in insurance, it's a state-run thing, and we have audits every year. Okay, so a lot of the stuff, I mean, is all done behind closed doors. Okay, so you're back to is the church a corporation? Because human resources doesn't want that stuff written down, and in most cases, we don't want our employees to know how those decisions are being made. Okay, same thing.
Right, well, again, I mean, I think I give you more credit for that. I mean, I think if you want good morale among your people, you want them to understand that type of thing as best as can be understood. I mean, sometimes it is just we got to fill, you know what I mean. But the more understanding, the more communication, openness is at work, the better the morale is going to be. Because the problem is that when everything is opaque and nobody understands why decisions are made a certain way, the natural presupposition is, well, there's some corrupt purpose behind this decision. Someone wants something for him or herself, and that's why this is being done this way. And no one is giving a reason, because there is no good reason. It's a reason that has to do with private benefit.
Right.
And that's not the atmosphere that you really want to have in a large operation if you want people to be committed to it and to believe in it and to want to give themselves to it fully, like you said, one employee would want employees to do.
Yeah, I can walk a couple steps towards you on that, because what we started to do is we started to share more of the financials and production records and things like that. But when it came down to managerial or personnel decisions, all of that was backroom stuff. And a lot of times it was stuff that if you shared that with the employees would go, why did you put that person in that place? That doesn't make any sense at all. Well, the reason was because we had a connection to this person who was in home office that called us and said they need to be promoted to such and such a level. It was all stuff that they couldn't understand, because it was all politics. It wasn't a merit-based system. It was just, this person knew this person, and this is how it's going to work, because we want to move this person from one location to another. We need a spot, so this guy's getting promoted, and people are going. And they knew when we were not making good business decisions. They were smart business. They knew it, but we weren't going to validate it for them. We were just going to keep doing what we were doing. So I understand the opaqueness sometimes of corporations and decisions, but we still haven't gotten to the point where Bishop Knesout said that you fostered disunity in the church. Okay, so try to explain to me how what you said on your blog didn't foster disunity. Okay, so I mean, what were the parishioners thinking? And I know that you had some conversations with them, but when you said something about the bishop or about the pope, did you get a lot of feedback from the parishioners? Did they believe that you were being divisive in the church, or did they feel that that was helpful, the information that you were sharing and the ideas you were sharing were helpful? Do you have a good sense of that?
Well, I mean, I guess I can only give the sense that I have. I mean, there's certainly, it's a possibility that people read it and found it quite disedifying and divisive, and I wouldn't know it, because I'd be the last person that they would say.
Well,
but
you could have some people come and say, "Why did you do that? That's terrible. You're talking about the bishop or the pope. You didn't get it."
Yeah, and it's not like I didn't have people come and question me on that to that extent, to some degree. And but I mean, I can say that, especially when it came to the people that I work most closely with in the life of the parish, the employees, and the more active volunteers, that they found it, the ones who chose to read my blog and think about what I had to say, found it much more unifying. It validated their own sense that something is profoundly wrong with the way the church is being governed, but that doesn't mean that the church herself is not the true Church of Jesus Christ. Those two things, you can have those both ideas in your mind at the same time.
Sure.
That we are part of Christ Church. We're dealing with Him in the sacraments. He's drawing souls to Himself through what we're doing. But we have this huge problem of that the people in charge do not know how to deal with the reality of sexual abuse by authority figures in the church. They don't know what to do, or if they do know what to do, they don't want to do it for whatever reason. And so we have this perpetual scandal that doesn't need to go on and on like this the way that it has. And that I found very widespread um, resonance with people that was helpful to helping them remain a part of the church as opposed to walk away from her in disgust, which is because I wasn't saying things that people didn't already know. I was not reporting facts that were not already part of the public record. They were all part of the public record. It's all just a matter of how you understand them. How does it affect your relationship with the church? And I mean, I'm not saying I'm a perfect person, that I'm perfect at doing that. But what I can certainly say, what I was trying to do was to help people stay in the church in spite of this evident problem with her governance in this area.
Okay, and you feel that by using your blog to articulate your ideas, that is helping people to better deal with the information and to stay in the church.
Right. I mean, especially since, because that's the other thing I wanted to say. I mean, it'd be one thing if I started a blog out of nothing to criticize the Pope and the bishops. I mean, that would be one thing. But that isn't really what I did. I mean, I already had an ongoing dialogue with people, which is what the blog really was. It was a living dialogue that I was putting myself into. And then I became aware of the truth about McCarrick, and then the aftermath, what the authorities in the church did about it.
Right.
And so as part of that dialogue, I was trying to be honest, to retain my own credibility as a priest. That's what I was trying to do. I'm not saying I necessarily even did it well, but that's certainly what I was trying to do. And from what people have told me, that is the effect, that where people became disillusioned with the institution, they did not become disillusioned with me as a priest. They still trusted me because I was telling them, I was being honest about what I was going through. It was a struggle for me also, that I could understand people wanting to leave the church over this, because I kind of did too, but I wasn't going to. I was going to try to deal with it this way. I mean,
okay, and if the parishioners that didn't read your blog, how can I even formulate this question? Okay, so the people who read your blog, you believe, appreciated it, and it helped them to better deal with information, and possibly even kept them in the church. Because I think there were a lot of people that left, okay, during this period, and probably period in 99 and 2002. So there's a whole bunch of people that left. They just threw their hands up and said, this is terrible, I don't want to be involved in it, and they just left. Your belief is that if you give them information in an honest, truthful way that they can talk about if they need to, that allows them a better opportunity to stay with the church. Is that a fair statement?
Right. Because I think that's, and I would apply that to a company also. I mean, and I think you probably agree. Tell me if you wouldn't agree with this. I mean, there are limits. I'm not saying there aren't limits, but a company where an employee, maybe the employee is not someone who him or herself would criticize the authority, but who does see things not being perfectly right and thinks things could be better, and to the level of pretty serious, very damaging type of problems. If that employee sees that there is room in the company for another employee who's an outspoken critic, who's clearly not trying to destroy the company, who is criticizing because he or she wants the company to survive. I mean, when you see that is the kind of atmosphere, that the place is big enough for there not to be punitive measures taken against somebody like that, then that increases your sense that there's hope for this company, that the company can overcome its problems and deal with them and survive. Whereas if you're that employee and you see someone making honest criticisms who then just gets fired, then you lose that sense.
Yeah.
And you probably start looking. You start looking for a job somewhere else.
Right.
I mean, because So I think, you know, by extension, that's what happened with people reading what I was writing, and in the case of the church, we have this whole other horizon, right? That because there is no competition with the church, so to speak. There's a divine promise to our church that she will survive, that she will draw souls to herself, that she will, in the end, present the people of God through Christ to the Father for eternal life. I mean, that is going to happen. We all want to be part of that, and may God, in His grace, make us part of that. And when we hold on to that faith, then that would seem to me to give huge room for criticism of the short-term managerial decisions, because you're not casting any doubt on the ultimate horizon here. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the short-term stuff that we can fight over, and we need to.
Okay, so let me take the opposite position of that. So there are a bunch of Catholics who still want to be Catholics. They still appreciate the church and the traditions of the church and the social aspect of it and all the other good stuff that the Catholic Church is all about, that don't want to hear any of this stuff. Okay? They don't want to know when the next priest is kicked out, and they don't care about the bishops and whatever. There's a point of view that if all of this cover up actually wasn't revealed, that there would be more Catholics in the pews, that we talk too much about this. What do you say to that?
I mean, I would say we've got to go to what we say we're all about, which is Jesus Christ, and His point of view on what happens when someone is sexually abused, and there is a victim who suffers, and Christ suffers in and with the victim, and Christ gives the grace to the victim of seeing that he or she has been a victim, and that a wrong has been done to him or her, and gives that person the courage to see it that way and to speak out about it in the way that is right for that person under the circumstances, which is for that person to determine, nobody else. But if you're a Christian, you got to hear those people. You got to hear what they say. That they are Christ crying out, the suffering Christ crying out. Just like we got to hear the poor, like we got to hear the unborn whose lives are being destroyed. We're not Christians if we don't hear that voice. So Catholicism, it should be a ritual life. I don't believe in burdening people more than they should be when they come to church. Everyone has a right to come to church in peace and pray and not have things shoved in his or her face in a way that is not fair. But it's not fair of the Catholic people to say the sex abuse of innocent people by priests is not my problem and I don't want to hear about it. That is not fair. We can't. That is not a Christian thing to say.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna end on a little bit of conversation about your boss. Okay, because as I come from the corporate standpoint, if you were my employee, I would have handled this totally different. We would have probably been in a room by ourselves for many hours trying to figure out how I get the most out of you as a bilingual priest handling two parishes and not upsetting the world as I see it as Bishop Knestout. So we would have handled this totally differently. But he didn't, okay, and he's, like I said, he's accusing you of disobedience and fostering disunity in the church. He's tried to correct you several times. You've been adamant that you're not going to give up the blog because that's an integral part of your the way that you do things, okay, both as an individual and also as a priest. But do you think that he is part of the cover-up?
Well, okay. I mean, what I would say is I think he and I are both to different degrees, but fundamentally we're in the same boat as suffering victims of McCarrick's lies. I mean, we both have had, I think, have had our trust in what we signed up for and committed ourselves to very deeply shaken by the way that he deceived, and then the way that those around him allowed him to deceive them and the people in general. I mean, I feel, much more common cause with Barry Knestout on that score than the idea that he's on the other side of, as part of the cover up per se, because by the time he was in a position to make serious decisions about this himself, the cover up was over. I mean, he was never the top dog anywhere until the cover up was basically over. So I wouldn't want to lay on him the decision to cover up for McCarrick.
Okay,
That said,
okay, go ahead. Sorry, no,
well,
go ahead.
I mean, what he's done to me, the only way I can make sense out of it is that he owes his own position now to having been involved in some way in justifying the ongoing cover-up, and that he did not speak out against it at a moment when I think he would have more peace as a human being now if he had. I mean, so.
Now, is that just speculation that that you said you think that Bishop Knesout was deceived or misled or whatever, just like you were, early as a seminarian? Is that just speculation, or have you had conversations with him about this? Have you ever?
He and I have never.
What about this McCarrick thing? Do you feel like you were deceived, or have you ever had specific conversations with him about that?
No, we've never had a heart-to-heart about that. I mean, I wish we had. I mean, I honestly do. And I take him at his word on a lot of the things that he said about it. I mean, he has said that he was stunned by the truth about what McCarrick had done. I mean, he said that in something along those lines in a letter to the people back in the summer of 2018. And I have no reason to think that what he's saying there is a lie. I would not want to accuse him of that. But he did the way he formulated his own knowledge. What he said, that no one ever came to him with an accusation.
Yeah.
He did not say that he knew nothing, which he could have said.
I'm going to read you that. I want to read you that sentence and then have you react to it. He said, okay, earlier this month, the Archdiocese of Washington conducted its own old review of the records and found at this time no claim, credible or otherwise, has been made against Cardinal McCarrick during his time in Washington. Okay, and then Bishop Knesout says, throughout the time that I was in Washington, I can tell you that I was not approached by anyone with any allegations or evidence of sexual harassment or abuse involving the Cardinal. I could have written that with one of my HR lawyers. Okay, your response to that wordsmithing there.
Right. Well, I mean, okay, I do not want to accuse him of having said something there that is false, because I want to.
I think that's totally true. I think every word in this press release is true. Okay, just I think that every word in this thing he thinks is true, and people who read this would think it's true without your knowledge, without the knowledge, and without reading each of these blog posts that he pulled a quote out. So I think that's true. But why would you word something like that?
Right. Well, I mean, I can speculate, but my speculation is based on a line of facts that I can back up in detail. That at some point in time, either in the 90s or in the unit decade of the 21st century, Barry Knestout became aware in some way of the fact that McCarrick had been accused and sued by seminarians and that he was ushered out quietly as the Archbishop of Washington for that reason. That was the reason, and that was kept secret. That to some extent Barry Knestout was aware of that, at least at the time of the immediate aftermath of McCarrick's resignation as Archbishop of Washington. So he could simultaneously write what he wrote there and also know perfectly well that he did know something, that there were accusers whose accusations needed to be treated with a lot more respect and love than they ever were. And that the fact that they were not treated that way is a terrible betrayal of what the church is supposed to be all about. I mean, I'm not sure he knew all of that at the time, but now looking back, that is, to me, evident. I think it's any reasonable person it's evident. And the response that would be appropriate under that circumstance would be for him to admit all that and then express his willingness to step down, because it's someone who's being in that position, it's hard for them to retain authority with any credibility.
Right. Okay, so let me go back, and we're going to only spend about 5 more minutes, but let me go back to this idea of a diocese as a corporation and a bishop as a CEO. Okay, so here I think are the parallels. They both have a mission. Okay, they both are looking for customers or parishioners. They both have assets to protect. They also have income that needs to keep coming in to protect the assets. You know, put a new building, put a new roof on a church, or whatever it needs to be. They all have a set of rules that they're supposed to be following. Why isn't a CEO, bishop, a CEO of a diocese? What is the difference? Okay, why is my analogy flawed when it comes to why you did what you did with your blog? And I would have fired you if you said the first bad word about me as your boss. What latitude do you have that normal employees do not have?
Right, okay. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is the story about St. Lawrence the deacon, who was in charge of the assets of the Church of Rome back during the persecution of Diocletian, I believe. I think it was Diocletian. And the emperor demanded all the goods of the church, that he was going to confiscate them. And St. Lawrence led in the poorest Christians to present to the emperor and said, these are our goods. This is our treasure.
Right.
I mean, that we have to see it that way. I mean, everybody has to be good stewards of the material goods. If you're a parish pastor or a bishop or the pope, I mean, you got to be a good steward of the material goods that are put into your hands. But if you don't see them solely as a means to an end that is not of this world, then you're gonna make mistakes. And you can't, holding on to wealth is not the right thing for a Christian shepherd to do. Right? I mean, if we have material goods, they need to be put to use for the good of gaining souls for eternal life, because that is the true good of the church. So, I mean, I think, we've got a serious problem here, which is that to a certain extent, right, that the Pope and the bishops would enjoy prestige in this world. We do want that. If by prestige what we mean is that their voice, their moral authority is solidly grounded on their integrity. And so when they preach the gospel, when we preach the gospel, when the clergy of the Catholic Church preaches the gospel, people are inclined to think what we're saying is worth listening to, because they see the witness of our lives, that we live solid lives that are close to Christ himself and his poor. I mean, that's the kind of prestige we want. We don't have it. We don't have anything like that. And the men who are in charge right now, unfortunately, it seems that they want to hold on to a different kind of prestige that we don't even want anyway. I mean, that they want to have the reputation as being clever CEOs, skilled managers, which they really don't appear to be, and which is not the reputation we want to have in the first place anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we were willing just to jettison all that and see ourselves as poor, humble shepherds of souls first and foremost, we could have this problem behind us quickly, because it is what it is. I mean, like, if we listen to the suffering ones and put their point of view first, if we could all do that, then we could get our good reputation back pretty fast. But we have to be willing to let go of the money, right? We have to not care about the money. If they sue us for $100,000, we got 100, you take it. We don't need it. We're the Church of Jesus Christ. We don't need that. You deserve it. Am I answering you?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. That was yeah, I'm gonna have to, like I said, I take a while to process things, but I still see I think the bishops are acting as regional managers, and they see the church as a big corporation, and they're taking on the persona of a manager whose prestige is not necessarily set up like you're speaking. It's set up by money. It's set up by political connections. It's who will come and kiss the ring. And I think that's the problem that we're dealing with. That it's a big corporation. There's a lot of money. There's a lot of bishops. There's a lot of bishops and cardinals that are trying to protect that money, from the victims. They try to put it in a trust or something. The victims have a harder time accessing services. We saw that with Chris O'Leary. He needed a lot of support, and it just wasn't forthcoming. And I'm sure a lot of that was a consideration of how much it was going to cost. But that's unfortunately a human nature foible. Money is power, and if you can collect enough of it, then you become powerful, and that seems to be where they want to land. Anything you want to add? Anything that we missed? I hope I wasn't too hard on you.
Not at all. No, I appreciate the opportunity.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a good conversation.
Anything you want to add?
How about a glory be?
All right, very good. Thanks for remembering.
Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
God bless you, Father.
You too, Dale.
Thanks again.
Good talking to you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay.